to test your valve seats is to invert the head on a level bench in a safe, secure area, outside preferably. Fill both combustion chambers to the top with kerosene, then leave them in a secure area for 4 hours. Both liquid levels at the end of the test period should be within 1/16 of an inch of each other. If there is a difference between the two levels of the liquid, then you need to remove the valves and investigate what the problem is. You may need to regrind your valve seats back in or even replace your valves.
The leak test starts at 9:40.
As you can see here, both levels are within an acceptable level, and we're good to start the head installation.
So, next thing I want to talk about are your pushrod tubes. Basically, it's a very crude oil pipe, and what it does is it takes oil from the head that's been delivered from your rockers, and it runs down here and back into your crankcase. There is some crankcase pressure inside into your rocker boxes. What I do is I fit Viton O-rings to the top and the bottom. Now, Viton is a material that can withstand high temperatures. The normal rubber O-rings can't. Now, the temperature at the top of your head is significantly higher than what it is at the bottom of your barrel. Meriden specify that you can use rubber O-rings at the bottom. Rubber O-rings are cheaper than Viton, but I know that these rubber O-rings deteriorate over time and they fall to bits with the heat, getting hot and cold repeatedly. They just drop to bits. Viton doesn't. So I really strongly recommend you fit a Viton O-ring in there. So your Viton O-ring forms a seal around your tappet guide block, around the top here, which I hope you can see. And it sits on top of your cush rubber, or your crush rubber. That crush rubber forms a seal around the bottom of this bit of metal. It's dog rough. There's no other word to say. It's just not good. Everybody uses it. You have to use it. There's no alternative unless and I have seriously considered re-engineering this. As again, all this is an oil pipe, but it causes no end of trouble on Triumphs. Because over time it's rattling around and vibration, and these seals just give up. This top one is jammed in to your cylinder head, and your bottom one, as I say, forms a seal around here, and all it does is it brings oil, just pushes on like that, and oil drips down from your rockers and builds up in here, because the holes in the top are higher than where the seals are. So you've got your seals down here, oil builds up above the top of the O-ring. Oils over time gets acid in it from the combustion processes, and that acid just eats away at your seals. Even Viton gets eaten away with the acid that's in the oil, and that's why these things fail. So what you got to do is you need to give it the best chance you can get to give it the longest longevity. And what I do is I put some high temperature silicon in here, which is oil rated, so it's okay to use in oil and it won't deteriorate. And when you put that silicon in, you must be very careful not to get the silicon above that point. You do not want any silicon above there on the top, because it will block the little oil ways which are trying to get the oil back into your crankcase, and you generate a huge problem for yourself So that you put the silicone on this rubber o-ring and you just smear it around, and you put the silicone in before you put the o-ring in, and then you put the o-ring in as well, and then you've got silicone on the o-ring. That little bit of silicone will smear along, and that will work a treat, and you'll end up with an oil-free engine for a long time. You'll probably double or triple the life of your seals, and the same applies to the top one. Okay, so we'll go on to the crush that you hear everybody talking about. That crush is from compressing that o-ring here into the cylinder head, what can I call it, the receiver head block that this sits in. You must make sure that that cylinder head, in the cylinder head where this fits into, is meticulously clean and free of oil before you do this. So you do the same thing, you put a thin layer of silicone around here, put your o-ring on, and then you put your head on. So when you put the head on, you will find that there is a gap between the top of your head gasket and the bottom of the cylinder head, and you'll be able to see through there. That gap needs to be between 30 and 40 thousandths of an inch. Not less or more. It's quite important, and the reason it's important is because that little crush rubber gets squeezed to death. If you over squeeze it, it will collapse, and if it collapses, then you'll get an oil leak, and you don't want that. Trying to stop the crush rubber from bulging out, because when you put pressure and push down, obviously this little soft rubber here is going to want to go somewhere. So what they did was they came up with what's called the wedding ring, and that tube fits over here. Oh. Now your crush rubber sits on the end of this pushrod tube. The wedding ring sits like that, and your crush rubber is in there. So when you apply pressure from the top, the rubber bulges out and helps form a seal. So you need to put some silicone in here as well. So to give these a good fighting chance, you need to degrease them. Make sure that there's no grease on these at all. When you do a rebuild, always put new ones in, because these are very thin. So what happens is that they do distort. So fit new every time, and they fit over the top of your crush rubber like that, and it sits your tappet guide block interface between the barrel and the guide block, and then the pushrod tube sits down on top of it like that. And if you've got everything right and you've got your crush right, it will work. If you've got any of it wrong and your crush is incorrect, it won't work. If you haven't got enough crush, you're not going to get the compression needed to form that seal.
In order to gain the correct compression to make the seal work, there is a tolerance of only 10 thousandths of an inch. That measurement is absolutely critical to make that seal work. In the service manual, it gives a crush gap between the cylinder head and the gasket as 0.03 to 0.04. You measure that with a feeler gauge. If the crush is insufficient, the compression deformation forces will not form the seal. If the compression forces are too great, the seal will collapse.
Because it is really important, and it is one of the big areas of oil leaks on these bikes. And as you know, I really don't like oil leaks. These bikes don't leak if they're assembled properly. If they leak, it's because you put it together wrong. That's all I've got to say about that. Do the job right. So the next thing we need to do is to do a dry assembly. So without any silicone or anything, we need to check what the gap is between the top of the head gasket and the bottom of the head. So we assemble everything and then we put the head on and let it sit there, and we'll measure it up.
Okay, to do this, first ensure the pusher-up tubes are firmly installed in a position with the white-on O-ring and seated firmly into the cylinder head. Now lower the head onto the barrels and guide the tubes onto the tappet guide block seat with the white silicone seal in place. Do not use the wedding rings at this stage. Next, install the two center head studs loosely and fit the center head stud cap head nuts and tighten down gently just to put an even pressure on the white seal and level the head. Now measure the gap between the head and the gasket with feeler gauges. This gap measurement is critical, between 30 and 40 thousandths of an inch. If the head has never been skimmed, however, then this should be correct anyway by just using the standard kit. If your head has been skimmed in a machine shop, however, then there are 3 thicknesses of head gasket and 3 thicknesses of silicone seals. There are also many versions of pushrod tubes available, so you can put them together in order to be able to get the correct gap. I just want to emphasize the danger of ignoring this information. If you overcompress the white crush seal using too large a crush gap, all elasticity will be lost in that seal and the seal will collapse. It may form a decent seal at first, but due to it being overcompressed, it will eventually collapse and then you'll have another oil leak. If the crush gap is too small, then what will happen is that you'll get insufficient compression on that seal, and again, it will leak. So spending some time to get that right really pays dividends. Just remember that fitting a thicker head gasket will reduce your compression significantly. These should only be fitted if you've had your head skimmed. Once you've established the correct gap, we can start installing the cylinder head. Fit the studs turned end down. Next, we need to install all of the studs. As in the photo, lock 2 nuts together and torque the studs down into the barrel. Torque them down 10% more than the head torque. Now slide the cylinder head over the top of the studs and fit all the washers and cylinder head nuts.
One thing I just do want to emphasize is that when you're fitting these studs on the head, make sure you screw them in and then screw them in 10% more than what the torque value is, just to tighten them up. The reason you do that is that when you torque your the nuts down on top here, you're torquing down onto the head, not onto the barrel. You don't want to be turning the whole screw round. And then also when you unscrew these, it will unscrew from here rather than unscrewing the whole stud. It just gives you a more accurate torque reading. The other thing is ensure that you've used the right size washers on here. You need to use the thick washers, not the little skinny things. That's about it really. Other than that, it's just a matter of torquing it down. I've made a little stub out of a piece of Allen key that fits in here, and I've got a 3/8 drive socket that fits into here, and it's just a matter of torquing these up. Now I've already been around a couple of times, I'm just going to go around and check it one more time. So it's the centre ones are 16 foot-pound and that's the 5/16, and the 3/8, all the 3/8 ones are 18 foot-pound. Obviously work from the centre out. For the outer ones, I've got my digital torque wrench. So again, 18 foot-pound. after that we need to put the rocker boxes on.